The Kuan-Chu Opera Fair at Huqiao Hill epitomized the popularity of Kuan-Chu opera in China under the rule of the Ming and Qing dynasties. The melodious melodies that originated in this area south of the Yangtze River were carried to the imperial palace and even to frontier towns in the provinces of Yunnan and Guangxi. During the Ming dynasty in the 1600s, an Italian missionary by the name of Matteo Ricci came to China. At this time, Europe was rising rapidly, but China was still the richest country in the world. To the eyes of Matteo Ricci, the Chinese Empire had everything necessary for the life and happiness of its people: food and clothing, ingenious gadgets, and luxury goods. Matteo Ricci was surprised by the attitude the Chinese had toward wealth. As he saw it, vast wealth had not nurtured in the Chinese an ambition for territorial expansion and conquest of other countries. They behaved politely, were well educated, and knew how to enjoy life. They had refined almost every detail in life so that every facet was imbued with an artistic quality. In his notes about China, Ricci wrote, "People in this nation love opera very much. Many young people are involved in opera performance. Opera troupes travel all over the country to put on performances for the public or individual families. People hire these opera troupes to perform at grand banquets in which the guests eat and watch the performance at the same time. Such banquets often last more than a dozen hours, and the performance goes on until the end of the banquet." The form of entertainment Matteo Ricci is referring to is Kuan-Chu opera. He felt for himself the ardent love the Chinese people had for this form of dramatic art. Matteo Ricci was from Italy, the nation where Western-style opera originated. At a time when Western-style opera was gaining popularity in Italy, Kuan-Chu opera had already entered its golden age, almost 200 years earlier than the time when Italian opera reached its zenith. But this is a remote and glorious period in the history of China, and it is one which, until recently, had almost been forgotten. Along with Kuan-Chu opera, a kind of lifestyle that accompanied it was also forgotten. It was a lifestyle that had once brought satisfaction and peace to the spiritual world of the Chinese. In the 21st century, has this ancient drama culture lost its vitality? And as a part of traditional culture, can Kuan-Chu opera be updated to suit modern life? Painter Chen Danqiang became well known in China and abroad for his oil series entitled Tibet. Before returning to China in 2000, he lived in New York, a recognized center of Western contemporary art. Chen has published a large number of articles and commentaries in which he compares the cultural environment in China with that in the West.
我是一个上海的孩子，那上海是一个被殖民了上百年的一个城市，是吧？所以很多租界，所以我小时候的一个景观，我一睁开眼睛就开始有记忆的时候，这个景观其实就是一个西化的景观，西式的弄堂、西式的洋房什么这些，因为小孩子第一印象非常重要。那么到了真的西方以后，那第一我就失落了，我就发现这个我们中国那点西化是非常表层的啊，非常有限的。 所以你在失落当中，你立刻会寻找自己，啊，无论是自尊还是有自卑，你会寻找自己。
在过去所谓落后的这个东方世界的民族在经济上面、在政治上面获得独立以后，在经济上面又得到了发展以后，都开始有一个文化上面的自觉。 所以从80年代开始，在中国其实也出现了一种文化的自觉，就是我们的文化是不是一无是处啊？在世界的这样一个文化的这样一个大家庭里面啊，是不是它只能被淘汰啊？还是它也是这个大家庭里面一个灿烂的一个成果
Lo Yu Lie, a Peking University professor of philosophy, fell in love with Kunqiu opera nearly half a century ago. Upon graduation from university in 1961, he joined the Beijing Kunqiu Opera Research Society. In the 1980s and 90s, he was an executive member of the Research Society, and in 2003 he sponsored the founding of the Peking University Research Institute of the Guqin Zitha for Peking Opera and Kunqiu Opera. Kunqiu opera began to decline in popularity 100 years ago, and recognizing this, Tai Yuanpei, Wu Mei, and other great educators and masters of Chinese culture included opera studies in the curriculum of Peking University. Kunqiu opera was performed in the classroom, providing hope, albeit a slim one, that this old form of performance art would survive.
Kunqiu opera, it seems, was the preserve of the well-educated. At least this has meant there have always been people who are interested in keeping it alive. One such person is Professor Zhou Qin.
Zhou Qin started to learn Kunqiu opera in his childhood. When he was sent to the countryside as a middle school graduate to receive re-education in the 1960s and 70s, he continued singing verses from various Kunqiu operas. Today, in the autumn of every year, he runs an elective course in Kunqiu opera at his university, and it attracts a large number of Kunqiu opera fans.
像苏州园林里的那个池塘那样，看起来是一潭死水，但是里面鱼能活，是吧？荷花能长出来，为什么呢？这里面有一个结构，这个结构是在水池的下面有很深的井，这个井一直通着地下水。我们从这个原则上来说，可以它通着这个池塘的水，通着太湖，通着长江和大海。昆曲还靠着自己的文化的因素来支撑着，还绵绵若存。
Suzhou is now a modern metropolis, an epitome of the fast development of a commodity economy in China. But Suzhou has retained its several hundred-year-old outlook virtually untouched. For example, no buildings higher than 6 stories are permitted to be built in the downtown area to ensure that the highest building will always be North Pagoda, built during the Three Kingdoms period more than 2,000 years ago. In this 1,000-year-old city, the traditional and the modern exist side by side in harmony. In 2002, in Suzhou, a new private garden named Nanshi PG appeared near Wangshi, the famous classic garden. The owner of Nanshi PG Garden is Ye Fang, a senior painter with the Suzhou Academy of Painting. Ye Fang spent his childhood years in the house of his great-grandfather on his mother's side, and during those memorable years, he had many chances to watch Kunqiu opera. Ye Fang often invites friends to his private garden for a drink. His guests on this occasion are Professor Zhou Qin of Suzhou University and Mao Weizhi of the Suzhou Kunqiu Opera Troupe. For these friends sitting in an exquisite garden enjoying a cup of tea, this is the ideal life of comfort and ease. The melodious sound of the flute brings back scenes from 100 years ago, and people watching and listening feel they can reach out their hands and touch these scenes. Of the 204 successful candidates in the imperial civil examinations during the Ming and Qing dynasties, 34 were natives of Suzhou. Men of letters have left their prints both in the many private gardens they built in the city and on Kunchu opera, a form that actually originated in their private gardens. The owners of these gardens certainly knew how to enjoy life. After retiring from their official posts, they would buy a piece of land in the best location they could, build a high wall to keep themselves away from the outside world, and develop the land enclosed within into a beautiful garden.
人有文化品味，他就像当时的文人去琢磨去经营一座那个苏州园林，经营一个庭院那样子。他需要一种锦心绣口的一种东西。你比如说，他去经营一个庭院，他会去琢磨这个地方我是不是挂一幅字比较好，这个地方我放一块奇石比较好，这个地方放一个盆景比较好。他要不断的琢磨。对昆曲，他也是这么琢磨。
Shortly after the form known as Kunshan opera came into being, the owners of these private gardens hired folk musicians to play the musical accompaniment for the opera performances. The musicians were also asked to join the master of the house and his friends to recite poems, draw pictures, and compose music. The music of Kunshan opera was developed on the basis of the music that accompanied the singing of poems of the Song dynasty. It also assimilated a number of elements of folk songs popular in areas south of the Yangtze River. More than 2,000 tunes are used in Kunchu opera, and they were composed mainly by well-educated people of their time. In terms of the composition of the verses, the style was very similar to the one that prevailed during the Tang and Song dynasties, with highly poetic words and phrases used to express the sentiments of the various characters. Men of letters spent a great deal of their time in gardens, and these and other sites that made the most of the beauty of nature were generally the settings for Kunchu opera performances. A visit to the garden is an episode from the representative Kunchu opera The Peony Pavilion. The story of the Peony Pavilion begins with the heroine Du Linyang visiting a garden in spring. This Kunchu opera is full of poetic lines. Two of them are, "If you're not in a garden, how can you know what spring is like?" And, "It's a fine day and the scenery is beautiful. From whose courtyard does this pleasant music come?" The playwright wrote these lines with profound passion, with the aim of integrating the garden scenery with the sentiments of the stage characters. The playwrights describe the changes in the gardens over the 4 seasons: the winds, the blooming flowers, the snow, and the moonlit nights, and of course, the joys and sorrows of human lives.
The people of Suzhou describe their gardens as a tangible form of Kunchu opera and Kunchu opera as a garden of music. Over the centuries, the combination of beautiful garden scenery and Kunchu opera has created a unique spiritual world, not only in Suzhou, but across the whole of China. Thank you for staying with us on today's New Frontiers, and tune in again next time when we'll bring you more about the history and development of Kunchu opera. I'm Ji Xiaojun from CCTV International. See you next time.